Welcome everyone to the Collaborative Mentoring webinar series, and thank you for joining us today. Today we'll be talking about reentry mentoring, conversations from the field on working with system-involved youth. I'm Hannah Granfield from the Governor's Prevention Partnership in Connecticut, and I'll be facilitating today's conversation. Desiree Robertson, Senior Manager, Team Up Youth Mentoring Partnership from Memphis Grizzlies Foundation, is also on the line with us today, and she'll be moderating the question panel. Slide, please. This webinar is part of the Collaborative Mentoring webinar series, which is funded by the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention through the National Mentoring Resource Center, and facilitated in partnership with Mentor, the National Mentoring Partnership. These webinars would not be possible without the planning team, which includes the mentoring partnerships shown on this slide. In addition to this webinar series, the NMRC provides resources such as free technical assistance for mentoring practitioners. At the end of this webinar, we'll provide more details about how you can access this free support. Next slide. So today, before we get started, I just wanted to share some housekeeping information with us. In 1 week, you'll receive an email with information on how to download a copy of these slides and view the webinar recording. You can also access this information directly by going to Mentor's website in the next week. And to continuously improve this series, we're looking for your input. A short survey will pop up as you exit the webinar. Please take about 3 minutes or so to give us feedback. Next slide. We really want today to be a participatory experience, so please use the question box to ask questions throughout today's webinar. Desiree will be queuing up questions to share with the panelists during the Q&A portion of the webinar. We may not get to all of the questions today because there are several hundred of you on the webinar, but we're going to do our best. The questions that we share with our panelists are generally ones that broaden or deepen the conversation. So first, we want to get started with a poll to get a sense of who is with us today. So, what is your experience level in the mentoring field? Please select one, and we'll take a second. Super great. So we have about 36% of us are beginners, so we're really new to this field. The majority of us are intermediate, and then we have a bunch of experts as well on our webinar today. Thanks, everybody. So we have 2 more polls. The second one is, what is your role in the mentoring field? So just select one of those, and we'll do the same thing. We'll take another second, and then we'll get a sense of who's on today's webinar. Wow, that's great. We have a lot of practitioners. That's our biggest group today. And then our others are about 31%. And then we have some researchers, funders, and then TA providers. That's really great, everybody. Thanks so much. And then our last poll is really specific to today's webinar. So what is your current involvement with the juvenile criminal justice programming? So you just have 3 to select on that one. So we'll take another second. That's great. Oh, I'm so happy. So many people are currently working in a program that addresses reentry youth. No involvement, so hopefully you get some pointers on how to work with our system-involved kids. And then about 13% of soon to launch. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks so much, and we hope that today's information really gives you what you're looking for. Next slide. So on today's webinar, we have 2 fantastic panelists. The first one is Tina Banas from Family Reentry, and her contact information is there. And then Ronin Davis from the Council of State Governments Justice Center, as well as his contact information. So if you have any questions again today during the presentation, please use the Q&A There'll be a short time, as I mentioned earlier, at the end for questions and answers. So I'd like to introduce and get started really on the good stuff of our webinar today. So welcome to Tina Banas. She is a licensed clinical social worker who received her undergraduate degree in psychology from Fairfield University and an MSW from the University of Connecticut. Throughout her career, she has worked in a variety of family service agencies, providing clinical counseling, case management, support services to children, adolescents, and families at risk. Currently, Tina serves as the Director of Youth and Family Services at Family ReEntry in Bridgeport, Connecticut. In this role, she provides administrative oversight for the daily operations and vision of the youth programming, including mentoring services for children that are impacted by parental incarceration, family violence, and youth involved in the juvenile justice system. She offers direct service and wraparound support to clients and also works very closely with volunteer mentors and community providers. She collaborates with the Governor's Prevention Partnership and the Juvenile Division of Connecticut's Court Support Services. She's also the co-chair of the Greater Bridgeport Mentoring Collaborative and is an active member of the local interagency service team. Welcome, Tina. Next slide. Our second presenter is Ronin Davis. He oversees the Community Initiatives Technical Assistance Team at the CSG Justice Center. They provide support to Second Chance Act grantees, running mentoring programs, fatherhood and family-based programs, and technology career training programs. His work focuses on the partnership between community-based agencies, corrections, and juvenile justice departments. Prior to joining the CSG Justice Center, he worked on the Strong Fathers, Stronger Families program at CETCO, where he oversaw 4 community-based organizations that provided services to low-income parents. He has also worked on alternatives to incarceration for populations through internships at the Legal Aid Society and the Center for Court Innovation's Midtown Community Court. Before moving to New York, he worked in juvenile detention as a bond commissioner, and a community justice professional at the Boulder County Juvenile Assessment Center in Colorado. He received a BA in psychology and English from the University of Colorado in Boulder, and he has an MS in social work from Columbia University. So welcome, Ronin, and welcome, Tina. Next slide, please. So to set the stage, I'm going to spend a few moments just discussing a juvenile justice mentoring network, and I'll speak just for a few moments about this. So you can see this really great photo. Those are the active mentoring practitioners that are involved here in Connecticut in the juvenile justice system, Juvenile Justice Mentoring Network. This was started in 2012 from the Governor's Prevention Partnership, who partnered with our Connecticut's judicial branch, the Court Support Services Division, to adopt mentoring for nonviolent youth in the juvenile justice system. They set up data collection systems and training for the providers on specific needs of youth and working to strengthen mentoring quality standards. This program is currently in year 5. Connecticut has been a progressive leader in juvenile justice. Youth currently that are involved in the juvenile justice system are ages 10 to 18, and this current year, a bill is being proposed right now to raise the age of 19 to change the age of the juvenile justice youth. Here in Connecticut, the philosophy has always been on serving youth in the juvenile justice system that provides diversion programs to youth rather than having them have a touch point with our system. There are so many programs for youth in Connecticut prior to being involved in the court system that currently here in Connecticut they are seeing the lowest number of youth involved in the juvenile justice system in years. So it's actually at an all-time low, which is great. The Governor's Prevention Partnership worked with the state of Connecticut Court Support Services Division to create this juvenile justice network. CSSD, as they are known, is committed to providing research and evidence-based models of intervention whenever possible. The partnership then, in turn, created an infrastructure to provide mentoring to the youth in all of the youth court districts throughout Connecticut. This partnership had its own competitive bid process in which 11 mentoring programs were selected to be the mentoring providers. So at the partnership, we are not direct service. We just build the capacity and the infrastructure and the fiduciary for this juvenile justice network. Happy to say that last year the Juvenile Justice Network was awarded through the Governor's Prevention Partnership an OJJDP enhancement grant. So the work is being done to really enhance the work of the juvenile justice system. Next slide, please. This will show in 2014 a network evaluation that really gives you a snapshot of who the kids are that the juvenile justice system works with. So in that first couple of years, the first years, the goal was 225 kids statewide. Clearly there was a need and a want for kids to be involved in mentoring, so it actually was 252 referrals. 46% of those matches lasted 1 or more years, or lasted 12 months or more, which is great. The bottom left gives you a snapshot of who the kiddos are. So 67% are males. Most of them are 14 to 17 years old, and that 44% of them were African American. So that is the snapshot of the 252 youth that were served during those years. And then that next little graph is about the average days to intake. So 27 days once the program received a referral, then to match them. And you can see that you actually, the 67% of the girls were matched quicker. Next slide, please. So using all of this data, where has it gotten us? So for the last 3 years, the Juvenile Justice System Mentoring Network has implemented a data system to help support that network. In 2015, we implemented Mentor Core at no cost to all of the 11 mentoring programs that are involved in this. Mentor Core is a program management software. If you are not aware, it's grounded in best practices for effective screening, training, matching, support, and how you do closure. Additional information can be found regarding Mentor Core on Mentor's website, and when you receive these slides, there's an embedded link in there. In 2016, using all of this data, the network saw the highest percentage of utilization that they had seen since the network had started. This really was due to the process creation in all of the data systems, because we use real-time data points to ensure that mentoring programs are providing the least amount of time from that time of referral to intake to match, and then obviously providing on-site case management and support to the families. Next slide, please. So we get asked a lot on how to set up a network such as ours here in Connecticut, and you'll hear in a few moments from Tina Banas, who is an active provider in the Juvenile Justice Network, so she'll tell you more about the day-to-day. But we're asked a lot about what you need in place, and some key recommendations are that first, as you know, you have to develop an infrastructure. So as we look back to our poll, the majority of us are already working with juvenile justice kids, but for those that are new or wanting to work on this, work with this population, really developing an infrastructure internally at your agency so that you can provide an overall structure to, how you do it, or, if you're going to work in partnership with other mentoring programs. We believe in a high level of participation. That really is about dedicating our time and our energy to the mentoring programs, who then entail really dedicate their time to supporting the system-involved youth, and they have the capacity to support the whole child, their family, and their mentor. Obviously, increased ability to monitor quality. Using Mentor Core, programs can see the rates of referral and intake to match and monitoring support, and they can really make real-time decisions about, how we work with a family or how we engage a kid in a different manner. Obviously, mentor recruitment is really big as well. Currently, as a network, they have 60-plus mentors who are waiting for mentees. As I mentioned before in my opening here in Connecticut, we have a really small amount of kids involved in the juvenile justice system, so now we have so many mentors. But this is really from intensive mentor recruitment efforts that mentoring programs do monthly within their own local catchment areas. Building relationships are so key to this work that we do. So building a relationship with the referral agency. So for here in Connecticut, it's with the court system and with the child, youth, family service centers. So really building that relationship, as well as, I like to add, building the relationship with each other, building it with the families, building it with the youth, and then obviously building it with the mentor. And then lastly, everything that the network does and the mentoring providers do is really about data collection and assessment tools. So if something is happening in a network, we address it very quickly. We make sure everybody's up to speed on the best training and TA available, and then we roll it out. So it's been really great. So next slide. As I talked a little bit about the structure here in Connecticut, I'd like to turn it over to Tina Banas from Family ReEntry to speak more about how they work with system-involved kids locally through their agency. Welcome, Tina.
Thank you, Hannah. Hello, everybody. I'm excited to be here. My name is Tina Banas, and I'm the Director of Youth and Family Services at Family ReEntry in Connecticut. We are a nonprofit organization, and we were established in 1984. We are considered a high-impact community justice agency seeking to reduce cycles of violence and crime, as well as incarceration, by providing direct service programs in 3 interconnected areas. Those areas are prisoner reentry, family and domestic violence intervention, and early intervention services and prevention programs for children of prisoners and youth involved with the juvenile justice system. While our agency began initially as an adult service agency, the youth services were introduced in 2003 with our Champions Mentoring Program. This is a school-based model which serves children and youth impacted by parental incarceration. But in 2013, the Governor's Prevention Partnership approached Family ReEntry and invited our youth program to participate in the formation of what's now become the Juvenile Justice Mentoring Network that Hannah just described. As she shared, this is a statewide network of quality mentoring providers who are serving juvenile justice youth, with referrals coming directly through the localized probation offices. This model of service seemed like a natural fit for us once the Governor's Prevention Partnership approached us, and we felt, based on years of successful adult reentry work and experience gained from working with children of prisoners, that this would be a great fit for us. So at Family ReEntry, we call our juvenile mentoring program the J-Connect program. Each of our providers has a different name for the program. However, we're all doing the same model and the same work. This is operating as a community-based mentoring model, serving system-involved youth on probation. Our program provides one-to-one community matches which focus on supporting youth to build internal skills and assets, as well as to build strength, personal capacity, and reducing recidivism. Mentors meet weekly with their mentees, spending 2 hours or more each week pursuing mutual interests and engaging in pro-social fun activities, also assisting the kids in developing life skills, encouraging their positive behaviors, and goal setting. One of the cornerstones of our mentoring work with youth is that we focus on the whole child and family, offering case management, wraparound, and counseling services when needed. Next slide. So who are the youth that we serve? Well, Hannah did touch on the fact that these are youth ages 10 to 17. I'm going to guesstimate that most of the kids we're serving are around the 14 to 16 age. But that being said, we have served kids as young as 10 and as old as 17 and actually 18. The youth that we serve are boys and girls. They've been referred by the local juvenile probation offices. They're either involved with a delinquency charge or something called family with service needs. I'm not sure if everybody on the call will be familiar with that. Family with service needs, or FWISN as we call it, it refers to a youth who's broken one of the rules of the Connecticut statutes, including running away from home, not going to school, disobeying school rules, or being beyond control of their parents. So these are definitely some challenging kids with challenging behaviors. While the FWISN kids are not considered judicial cases, they will receive the support of a probation officer. However, they won't go before a judge unless they become in violation of their probation mandates. In Connecticut, juvenile probation utilizes an assessment tool to determine risk of recidivism. This is the tool that they use, and it determines what level of risk they feel a youth is at. It's called the Juvenile Assessment Generic, or we commonly refer to it as the JAG. The JAG assessment is completed by the probation officer, and it includes terms in each of the following areas: criminal history, substance abuse, risk-taking, family distress, peer conformity, and personal values. The JAG was developed for the Judicial Branch Court Support Service Division based on literature that strongly suggests that these are the factors most accurately that can assess the likelihood of recidivism. So looking at all those different pieces, they're trying to get a picture of how much at risk is this youth for coming back into the system. Using the assessment, youth are classified as being either low, medium, high, or very high risk. For the mentoring services through our network, it's recommended that youth referred are assessed as low to medium risk. However, the network definitely does receive referrals for high-risk youth, and we do accept those referrals on a case-by-case basis, which is important to know that we discuss these thoroughly with the probation officers, and we try to determine if these higher risk kids will in effect be a good fit for mentoring. While the court is able to mandate service recommendations for system-involved youth, like counseling and drug screening, curfew, mentoring is a voluntary service and is not mandatory per conditions of probation. However, probation officers will strongly recommend it, and they'll encourage kids to participate. So part of our screening for mentoring is the youth and families' willingness to participate in the service. Many of the youth served in the Juvenile Justice Mentoring Network are youth who have few or poor connections to positive adults and youth who have little to no pro-social involvement. So they're not getting out and doing after-school activities or fun things on the weekend. In addition, a high percentage of youth served in our program tend to be living in lower income and single-parent households. Youth might experience poor family relationships, their families might be transient, youth may have learning or attention issues, they may exhibit depression, anxiety, or other mental health concerns. They may have previously been hospitalized for suicide ideation. Youth might be using substances, have possible addictions, or have been recently released from treatment. They may have negative peer associations or gang affiliations. They may feel their school or community environment is negative or unsafe. They may have or currently are experiencing family violence in their home. There may have been an incarcerated family member. They may be living in social isolation or in substandard environments. Many kids have experienced multiple adverse childhood experiences and therefore have a history of trauma, including things like homelessness, loss, abuse, and other types of victimization. So for some of the kids involved, it seems there are many odds against them and few protective factors that exist to help offset these risks. Mentoring, however, is most definitely considered a protective factor, so we're excited to be able to serve and provide that as a protective factor for these kids. Next slide. So who are our mentors? Well, mentors serving in the Juvenile Justice Mentoring Network are community volunteers, ages 21 and older, who've been interviewed, background screened, and trained to work with the population that we're serving. Our mentor pool is comprised of diverse ages. I have mentors in our program that are 21 to 82, so very diverse ages, ethnicities, and backgrounds. We've been able to recruit mentors of color as well as bilingual volunteers, which is really helpful when working with Spanish-speaking parents and guardians. Some of our mentors have experienced challenges themselves. Their lives are similar and much like the youth referred to our program. I once had a staff who would refer to those kind of mentors or volunteers as being hardcore mentors, and they didn't mind being called that, which is great. They were able to connect really well with the youth by virtue of the fact that they had walked in similar shoes that the youth is in right now. So that connection really helped. These mentors might also be referred to as what we are now seeing as credible messengers. That's a term regarding adults that have relevant life experience that can help youth to successfully meet their needs and goals. Credible messengers are individuals who are able to connect, motivate some of the most challenging young people because they have that shared experience by coming from the same or similar community and family system. And they may have also been involved in the justice system themselves. So identifying credible messengers to work with our youth population can be a real transformational process as these adults are able to engage youth in the intentional relationship and able to help build change attitudes, beliefs, actions, and just build up these kids in a positive way. But that being said, I do want to point out that we also have experienced many match successes by pairing youth with community mentors who want to make a positive impact, but who don't have the same shared personal experience as their mentee youth. So each situation is different, each match is different, and sometimes we're amazed at how well a match actually ends up being. We think it's going to be good, and sometimes it's fantastic, and it could be two very opposite types of personalities and people. So the things that we look at, like best practices recommend, those common interests, commonalities in matching, we take all of that into consideration. Youth-initiated mentoring is another practice that we're starting to look at more closely, where a youth themselves can help identify someone within their social network to provide mentoring support, such as a teacher, a coach, a church leader, a barber, anybody in the community that might present as a positive role model. Next slide, please. So this, you can see, is a flow chart. It was created for our network. It helps provide the course of services from the point of youth referral to the point of discharge. But before I go into the actual flow chart, I just want to touch on addressing something that we have worked on ongoing, and that's our pre-referral groundwork that takes place. I think Hannah mentioned earlier about relationships that we have with the probation officers, with other community providers, and of course within our own network. We really spent a lot of time talking and discussing what would be the best way to connect with the probation officers, because first of all, we did want the referrals, and second of all, we wanted to build that relationship so that the service would be most meaningful for the youth involved. I think this is an especially important topic if you are thinking about or starting to embark on establishing a similar program with justice-involved youth, because you're creating buy-in for the referral source. So what we learned early on, for the most part, is that juvenile probation officers are very protective of their kids. That's a great thing, right? They want their youth to succeed, to thrive, and to avoid recidivism. So in cases where program services in the past have not appeared to be trustworthy or sturdy, the probation officers wouldn't make referrals for mentoring. So in our case, when the network first began, we were advised that many of the probation offices had already been disenchanted by prior mentoring providers that didn't follow through on their promises to serve their kids well. And then probation actually started to develop an unpleasant taste toward volunteer mentoring. Not a good thing. Therefore, as a network, we had to strategize ways and partner with the probation officers. We learned that formal and informal visits to their office, as well as phone contacts with the probation staff, were needed to create connection and build collaborative trust. Of course, bringing food to the meetings often helped this process as well. As probation saw positive outcomes for their kids, they became more likely to refer to our mentoring programs. Mentoring staff have continued to provide outreach and connection, and in doing so, the network has really seen the partnership develop with probation colleagues. This is somewhat of a parallel process, I see, as youth and mentoring relationships, because as adult mentor offers outreach, proves their commitment, and works toward building trust with the youth, so does their partnership grow. So here we are actually in parallel process, and we are modeling the relationship building. So now let's take a quick look at the flow chart. You can see up at the top left, we receive a referral from a probation officer. Our program reviews it, goes through all the paperwork. We may have questions. We are certainly letting the probation officer who made the referral know that we've received the referral, and then we have an opportunity to discuss the case a little bit further. Sometimes a probation officer will call ahead of a referral because they really would like this youth to be considered for mentoring, but they do see some hesitations where the mentoring may not quite work out. So we talk about it, and we try to come up with a mutual plan to try to best engage the youth and the family. We then make an effort to outreach to the family, which often we're able to get a hold of them pretty quickly, but there are many instances where it is challenging to reach out to families. Their phones have subsequently been turned off. They may be in the process of some kind of crisis. Many families are overwhelmed. They may have chaotic things going on in the home, so they're not as organized. So we do have attempts to reach out by phone, by letter if we need to. Then once we reach them, we're able to do the intake. We keep the mentor referral source apprised of each step as we go through it. So intakes are typically completed at the youth's home with a parent or a guardian. If the family's not comfortable having us come to their home, as is the case sometimes, we suggest meeting at our office, but occasionally we've also completed intakes at the youth school or at a local coffee shop near where a family resides. Of course, we pick up the tab for any drinks. Flexibility is really needed to work around family schedules, so that's one thing I definitely want to emphasize. A challenge when we're unable to make contact or successfully schedule an intake, that particular referral may then move into a referral withdrawn. As cases are intaked and we are able to move towards match, the matches are facilitated with a staff member present, and they typically happen at the youth's home, again, with flexibility in mind. The monitoring or the match support piece is provided throughout the life of the match, and mentors submit a visit log at the end of each month identifying their face-to-face and phone contacts with their mentee, as well as the number of contact hours and the activity or focus of their sessions. So we definitely have contact with the mentors and families minimally once a month, and then in addition we're receiving this visit log from the mentors. For the sake of the program, a successful match is one that's able to be maintained for 12 months. However, I also want to point out that in some cases where the match terminates prior to 12 months, there still may have been some demonstrated benefit for the youth as a result of the match relationship. Most times we're hoping that match closure is a planned closure and that it may happen at the 12-month or after 12-month period. However, we all know as practitioners, match closures are abrupt sometimes and sometimes unavoidable based on a variety of factors. Those factors include youth or family noncompliance, or youth is placed outside of the community. Mentors may experience unexpected life changes and many other issues. So if a match does end early due to a mentor withdrawing from the program, the youth is given the option of being rematched. So now they're back and maintained within our program. Similarly, if a match closes prematurely due to the youth situation, a mentor can request to be rematched and placed with another youth in our program. Throughout the process, program staff maintain contact with the referral source even after the youth is discharged from probation. The referral source still likes to receive some status updates, especially when the update is favorable. This information, I find, can be a real bright spot for a probation officer. It helps them validate the work they do with challenging youth cases. And of course, it gives us pleasure to be able to spread the good news of how well a youth is doing with their mentor. Next slide. So matching. Regarding the matching process, we again follow best practices, as I'm sure most of you do. We match same gender. We look at common interests and commonalities, as well as personality and temperament. We also observe the 5-year spread recommendation where the mentor must be 5 years older than the youth mentee. And I think that's particularly important when working with juvenile justice youth, because many of our kids are in that 16, 17, hovering 18 age. Staff also take into consideration the preferences of youth, guardian, and mentors. In my experience, a lot of times youth don't have a specific request regarding the type of mentor they receive. They're still kind of questioning, what is this whole process about? However, there are definitely some youth who we know will do better with a mentor who shares a similar cultural background or who is of a certain age range. I once worked with a 16-year-old boy who told me that his vision for a mentor was to be matched with someone like me, in quotes, someone like me, he said, meaning someone who looked like him and who also grew up in what he referred to as, quote, the street life. So we were able to accommodate this, and we matched him with an African-American male who had experienced a childhood of abuse, family dysfunction, and had his own juvenile issues as a young person. Yet he was also someone who overcame the challenges. He became successful. He was emotionally healthy, gainfully employed, and midlife he was pursuing higher education toward a career change. So the youth and the mentor met, The youth took a little while to warm up, but the match went on to share months of connection, and the youth was able to make positive gains through the addition of this mentoring support. So this mentor, who I just described, is one of those credible messengers. He was able to relate well to a youth at a pivotal time in that youth's development. Some youth present as difficult to match based on experiences that they've had, perhaps trauma history, they may have mental health issues, delayed social skills, etc. So again, when matching and recruiting, we really need to consider what adult will be best suited for these youth. So strategic recruitment efforts are engaged. We look for mentors who can work with certain personality types or who have a particular skill in common to bridge with a youth. We might seek a mentor with some human service or mental health background who can best understand and tolerate youth presenting with these needs. We have a few kids on our caseload right now that have extremely high social anxiety. So it really does require a very patient mentor because it's difficult to go into public places with someone who's having social anxiety. So a lot more intensive training and support goes into those matches. The initial match meeting is often done at the youth home, facilitated by the program staff, and occasionally a match introduction might be planned at the youth school, again, at the office or at a local venue. We're always looking for what the family prefers. During the meeting, personal introductions are made, as well as exploration of mutual interest, potential goals for their match, followed by an exchange of phone and email contacts, and setting up the initial outing dates and times. Next slide. So this brings us to beyond mentoring. At Family ReEntry, the staff is committed to enhancing the resiliency of children and youth through caring relationships and supportive interactions using a strengths-based approach and providing case management with wraparound support. Working with system-involved youth can be challenging for staff and mentors on many levels. Programs need to look beyond the just mentoring to enhance positive impact and outcomes for these youth. Some of the things we provide beyond just mentoring include family engagement. Family engagement starts at the time of the initial intake. We're doing a home visit. We're listening to their stories. We're validating them, providing referrals and resources, checking in with them through the course of the match. Intensive case management, we provide that as is needed. Our staff assist with educational advocacy. We have attended PPT meetings, provided assistance with SAT preparation, and have actually helped kids complete the FAFSA form for college. We've connected youth and family members to counseling, mental health and addiction resources. We have helped them acquire basic needs, as well as supplemental needs like prom clothing, scholarships to a camp. We've even worked with a few families around immigration issues and have successfully assisted 2 of our youth in completing applications for the DREAM Act. Wraparound services for youth and their families are also provided, offering case coordination with other stakeholders, and oftentimes we do end up serving as the primary convener for this, especially when a youth has been discharged from probation and that system is no longer involved. Remember that once kids are on probation, their typical length that they're under supervision is about 6 months. We typically will get the referral maybe 3 months into their probationary period, and if they complete successfully, that might mean that once they're matched with a mentor, it may be 2 or 3 months later that their probation successfully ends, but we are continuing the service, so we are providing that transition for them. However, sometimes things still happen, and we need to provide that wraparound care for them. We also offer advanced mentor trainings to our mentors. We've sponsored group sessions with mentors where they can come and share challenges and highlights of their match relationship. We offer discussion on topics such as mentor attunement, family engagement, cultural connections, and just ways that they can be more effective as a mentor. I think also just getting the group of mentors together, it gives them a lot of support and helps them to feel that they're part of a greater group, a larger movement, and not so much in isolation, just being with this one youth. Group events we offer are things like events where mentors and mentees can come together and do a lot of pro-social activities, such as water skiing and rock climbing. We also offer events that We invite mentors, mentees, and their families. We have an annual backpack and back to school drive. We have an annual holiday event where parents can come and select gifts and toys that are donated for their children. We've also sponsored psychoeducational opportunities for kids and their mentors to attend, and we've explored such topics as teen dating and healthy relationships. As I wrap up today, I just want to add how valuable it's been for our agency to be part of the larger network of mentoring providers who are serving system-involved youth in Connecticut. The network has been a tremendous resource for capacity building, sharing of knowledge and best practices, as well as providing support and validation of the work being done with the vulnerable youth. So I want to thank Hannah for being part of the network and facilitating that, as it's truly been quite rewarding and very helpful professionally.
Oh, thank you so much, Tina. Some great information. I know there'll be fantastic questions when we get to the Q&A part, but thank you so much. So now I'd like to welcome Ronin Davis, who will spend a few minutes sharing what his agency does and how they are currently working with system-involved youth and adults. Welcome, Ronin.
Thank you, Hannah, and thank you, Tina. And also thank you to the staff at Mentor for putting this whole webinar together, and I'm really honored to be a part of it. I'm also really excited about all the work happening in Connecticut. Planning for this webinar, it was really awesome to hear about what the partnership is doing and what the different agencies involved are doing there. So yeah, I'm excited to tell you a little bit about what we do. So my name is Ronin Davis. I am a Grantee Technical Assistance Manager at the Council of State Governments Justice Center. I just want to give a quick overview of the Justice Center before diving in. So we are a national nonprofit organization that serves policymakers at the local, state, and federal levels from all branches of government. And you can see in our mission statement that we work to provide practical and consensus-driven advice and strategies to strengthen communities. So you can find our website at csgjusticecenter.org. Next slide, please. So in addition to providing or to serving policymakers, the Justice Center provides technical assistance, or TA, to reentry service providers through the National Reentry Resource Center, which is funded through the Department of Justice's Bureau of Justice Assistance. We are also the designated TA provider for Second Chance Act grantees. I oversee the Community Initiatives portfolio, as Hannah mentioned earlier, which provides technical assistance to all Second Chance Act grant programs awarded to nonprofit and faith-based agencies running reentry programs with a focus on mentoring. Our website also serves as a clearinghouse of reentry resources, including research, the latest funding opportunities, distance learning events, and news about reentry. So I definitely encourage you to check it out if you get a chance, and you can see on the slide there's a number of ways to connect with us, so I encourage you to use those. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, the Community Initiatives team works with reentry programs where mentoring is a focus. Since 2009, the Department of Justice has awarded around $85 million in Second Chance Act funding to over 180 nonprofit community and faith-based organizations. That amounts to 220 individual mentoring awards in 46 states and the District of Columbia. In fact, one of those Second Chance Act grants, a Young Fathers Mentoring Grant from OJJDP, was awarded to my fellow presenters agency, Family Reentry. On this slide, you can see some examples of the different types of reentry-related mentoring programs or mentoring awards that have been made over the years and some of the different population focuses of those grant awards. Next slide, please. In the course of our work, we have developed a document to support programs interested in incorporating mentoring into their reentry program or who are interested in bringing their mentoring services to a reentry population. This document is called Mentoring as a Component of Reentry, Practical Considerations from the Field, and it has been informed by the field and includes program examples and perspectives of mentors who have been formerly incarcerated. It is currently going through a final review with our funder, and we're hoping to release it soon. The document is technically geared toward programs serving adults, as that's an area where there's a real lack of research, but many of the themes can be applied to youth programs, and that's what I'm going to be talking a little bit about today. Next slide, please. So we've broken this up into 5 sections. Some you may be more familiar with than others, so I'm going to briefly describe what each of these entails and then go into more detail on the key factors for reentry. The first thing to keep in mind is that mentoring is not a reentry strategy on its own. hence the title of our publication. I believe my co-presenter alluded to this as well. Mentoring can enhance and possibly improve a reentry program, but simply providing a mentor for a youth returning to their community is not enough. Section 1 of our document discusses what many of you may already be familiar with. It talks about setting up a mentoring program. This includes considering what model you'll use, what are the goals of the program, the roles of the mentors, etc. Determining the goals of your program and the services you and your partners can provide will help determine how mentors will factor in. In some cases, your mentors may have a dual role, facilitating workshops or providing case management. In others, they may be volunteers, providing pro-social support and encouragement. The second section deals with developing partnerships with corrections. When developing any partnership, it's important to establish roles and responsibilities, gain buy-in, and determine information sharing processes, and learn about each other's policies. In a reentry program, those considerations are enhanced, as you will find yourself having to think about the security of the facility and the conditions imposed by the courts or probation and parole, among other factors. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this section in a moment. Section 3 deals with identifying those needs directly related to reentry and recidivism reduction and ensuring there are services in place to address them. As I mentioned before, mentoring is only a component of the program, so I'll be talking a little bit more about what the specific reentry needs are in a little bit. So Section 4 is all about training. There are lots of training resources out there for mentoring, but what we talk about are the considerations for mentors in a reentry context. We're actually hoping to develop another tool on this, ideally this year, but the basics include giving your mentors a kind of a 101 on reentry. Some considerations for that include training on the risk needs responsivity model, which I'll talk about when I get back to Section 3, collateral consequences and the barriers the youth will face in their community, developmental considerations, and the different agencies that may be involved in the youth's life, such as child welfare, probation, mental health, etc. Last is Section 5, which talks about evaluation. This is so important because we need more research. Evaluation not only helps further the field, but it helps you to determine how your program can improve. If you're able to work with an evaluator, we talk about the importance of involving them early in the planning process, utilizing their skills to develop the outcomes you want to measure and the tools you're going to use to do it. While there is more research on youth mentoring than adult mentoring, more is still needed, specifically on young adults and on the direct impact a mentor may have on program involvement and outcomes in addition to recidivism. A perfect example is a program in Connecticut, actually, that conducted a randomized control trial where the test group received all the same services as the control group. The only difference was that the test group had mentors. Preliminary results have shown that having a mentor improved the relationship between the program participants and their case managers, and it enhanced their engagement with the program. So while not every program will have access to an independent evaluator or be able to fund that type of study, you still want to think carefully about what outcomes you're examining and think outside the box of simple reporting requirements. Look at behavior change, increased knowledge, improved relationships with family members, the different ways those can be measured, and can they be linked specifically to the involvement of the mentor as well as the other services being provided. Next slide, please. So we developed a questionnaire to assist mentoring programs develop their partnership with corrections agencies. It's broken up into 3 sections: roles, responsibilities, and expectations, information sharing, and security and access. A lot of the concepts are basic, but with corrections there are extra considerations, including being prepared for cultural differences between a community-based organization and a locked facility or supervisory agency. I do strongly encourage you to think through how your program can incorporate mentoring before the youth is released from confinement, and to develop a strong partnership with probation and/or parole, as they could be a great ally in enhancing program engagement. While not every program can necessarily have a pre-release component, if that's something you're interested in, that's a lot of what this questionnaire can help out with, but it also deals with those programs like Tina's that are going to be focusing more on the individuals who are already released and on probation or parole. This questionnaire is still in draft form because it's part of our publication, so it's currently under final review, but once that's released, I encourage you to check it out. Because many facilities have restrictions on the number of volunteers that can enter and restrictions due to past justice involvement, one model that many of our grantees have implemented is running group mentoring inside the facility and then transitioning to one-on-one mentoring after release. So this is something to think about when planning a program. While recruitment may seem easy because of the quote-unquote captive audience of youth in a facility, it's important to establish clear eligibility requirements that corrections staff understand, both the requirements themselves and the reasoning behind them. This way you can ensure you're getting the population you need, as well as having processes in place to address challenges in reaching the appropriate population. Juvenile and correctional facilities have different policies about who can take part in programming and when, and these should all be figured out before the program is actually implemented. Next slide, please. All right, so now we get into the good stuff. This is section 3 of the document, which is identifying reentry needs. The risk needs responsivity principles, when followed appropriately, have been found to reduce the risk of recidivism or reoffending. The basic breakdown, and let me just say these concepts are certainly not basic, but for our purposes, we're going to break it down this way. Risk amounts to determining who you'll be serving. Oftentimes, when people hear risk, they think about risk of violence. While there are assessments for this, and it's an important factor to consider, in this model, we're discussing risk to commit a crime or reoffend. And with many of our programs, we often work with programs to not completely discount those individuals who are labeled or classified as violent, as they might be considered at a high risk to reoffend and therefore have the highest need for services. In reentry programming, services and supervision should be focused on those at a higher risk of committing a crime or violating probation or parole. This should be determined by an assessment that has been validated by researchers. And you might hear me reference back to things that Tina said, because a lot of what Family Reentry and the Governor's Partnership are doing fall in line with a lot of the work that we put out there. There are existing assessments to choose from, some free, some costly, and it's worth looking into the studies done on them to see what might be appropriate for your population. So there's one that Tina mentioned in Connecticut. There's a number that have been validated specifically for youth populations, others that are gender responsive, others that are focused on adults or specific cultural populations. For mentoring programs, instead of conducting the assessment yourselves, in some cases it may make more sense to include in your partnership with corrections a sharing agreement where the risk assessment data, both the risk level and the contents of the assessment, are shared with those in your agency who are working on the case plans, as many correction agencies and juvenile agencies are already doing these assessments. Need is the what should be addressed. So when we talk about needs, there are two kinds. Criminogenic, which are those needs that research has shown affect someone's likelihood of engaging in criminal or delinquent behavior, and non-criminogenic, which are important needs as well, but are not necessarily associated with criminal behavior. The last of these three principles is responsivity. Responsivity is how those needs are addressed. Someone's greatest criminogenic needs should be addressed, and how that's done should be appropriate to the individual's motivations, learning styles, and abilities. Responsivity also covers tailoring interventions to take into account an individual's race, culture, gender, behavioral health needs, and other factors. Mentors can play a really key role in the responsivity principle, as they may be the factor that can enhance motivation, and having a pro-social and oftentimes non-authoritarian figure supporting their progress can address specific criminogenic needs like avoiding antisocial peers and engaging in structured social and leisure time. So I do want to point out that in the Family Reentry Program, Tina mentioned that the higher risk individuals are taken on a case-by-case basis. So that's a lot of programs, especially those serving individuals who have already been released, follow that model. In Second Chance Act programs, it's worth noting that there is often a requirement to focus on the moderate to high risk individuals. And then if you're working with low risk, some of these grants will allow for that to be on a case-by-case basis. And the reason behind that is the moderate to high risk are often determined to be at the greatest need of support and services, whereas those deemed to be low risk, research has shown that providing them with too many services might actually be detrimental to their success in the community. That's not to say they wouldn't benefit from certain services or having a mentor, though, so you definitely don't want to discount them. But the medium to high risk have been shown to have the greatest need. All right, next slide, please. So on this slide, I've listed out the 8 core criminogenic needs with the top 4 highlighted as those top 4 have been shown to have the greatest impact on recidivism. So they often talk about the core 8 and then the top 4. These are like common slang terms in the field. I won't dive into these here, but I wanted to encourage you to, again, check out our website where there are extensive resources and training webinars on how to apply these principles. I did want to, point out a couple of these. So the antisocial associates are the, those peers who often bring a youth back into the either the criminal behavior or delinquent behavior, and so a mentor is like a key person in the life of a youth who can help avoid that or help counteract that. Also, there's the poor family and or intimate relationships. Again, I think this is another, if that's identified as a need for an individual, this is another area where a mentor can really play an important part. There's another thing that's important to know is that these needs, I guess the main thing I was trying to say with these is that these needs need to be addressed, whether by your program or in coordination with other programs when working with reentry populations. So developing systems partnerships like the Governor's Partnership in Connecticut is a key way to make sure that these needs are being addressed. Your agency may not have the capacity to address all those needs, and that's perfectly fine. That's where the partnerships come in and are really important. Another important thing to note is when addressing criminogenic needs, those should be addressed early on. So if you're working with folks on the pre-release side, you want to make sure that this begins before release and then continues immediately upon release. Whereas the longer someone has been out, it's the lower the likelihood that they'll be able to have the motivation to take part in the programming. Next slide, please. So lastly, I just wanted to point out that though the community initiatives team I work on is doing a lot of work on adult mentoring, the Justice Center has a juvenile justice team that has done great work and developed some very valuable resources on working with system-involved youth. While it has primarily focused on juveniles, we are now exploring how to provide better support and interventions for young adults. Young adults are often defined as 18 to 24, though in many systems this may include 15 or 16 to 24-year-olds. So again, it's more of a shameless plug for my agency's resources, but I do believe they're very helpful in working with system-involved youth. And a few of the Second Chance Act grant programs that the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention administers have focused on youth that are 24 and younger. I've worked with a lot of those grants that are focused on fathers. They also have ones that are focused on mothers and Latino populations. So we are seeing this definition of youth shifting a bit and seeing this young adult population as being a distinct population from what we think of as adults and what we think of as juveniles or youth. So we are working to address that more and figure out there's not a lot of research out there on them either, and so we're trying to figure out better ways to work with them. So I definitely encourage you to check out those resources. I think that's about it for me, so thank you all for your time, and I will go ahead and pass it back to Hannah.
Oh, thank you so much, Ronin. Fantastic information. I can't wait to see more of what your agency publishes, and happy to know that there was a connection with you and Family Reentry. So I think it just strengthens the work that will continue to be done clearly in Connecticut, but also that will be taken, throughout the United States. So thank you so much to Tina and Ronin. So Desiree, we have some time for some questions. Are there any questions in the question box?
Yes, thank you, Hannah. There are a few, so I will read some off and then get someone to answer them. Thinking about recruitment, we had quite a few questions around the recruitment of mentors. One of them was, if you have the majority of volunteers who come are not of the same race, let's just say white mentors and African-American kids or youth, do you have any advice to recruit mentors who can better identify with our youth to overcome the cultural differences? And can I ask Tina if she'd like to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Thank you, Desiree. Yeah, actually, we have, as I said earlier, we have quite a diverse mentor pool. So we do have our fair share of white men and women, as well as people of color that are providing services. Some of our very successful matches have been adults and youth that are not from the same race and also not from the same background necessarily. That 82-year-old man that I mentioned earlier, who's my oldest mentor, is a gentleman who's been mentoring his youth for quite some time, and he is a white man from a suburban community, and his mentee is an African-American boy from a very much inner city urban area. This boy's parents have both been incarcerated. Dad is still incarcerated. This boy tells me that his mentor is his best friend. This young man is 17, will be 18 in May. The mentor has been an incredible advocate educationally for this young man. This young man does have some minor learning disabilities, but he is, out and about in the community, and he has learned a lot of good life skills just having the connection with his mentor. We do have many kids and families that I know will do better with mentors who look like them, who have similar backgrounds. So the kinds of recruitment that we do is within the communities where these kids are referred. We will go to churches, we'll go to local colleges, community organizations, city hall, police departments, fire departments, really looking for men and women that could be great role models, that may have actually lived and grew up in the same community, so they kind of get what these kids are going through right now. So I hope that that's helpful.
All right, thank you so much, Tina. All right, and continuing on with some questions, I'll turn it over a little bit about evaluation. I know one of the questions was, do you conduct any surveys, assessments throughout the match or at the end of the match to track improvements or benefits of the match? So I kind of asked Hannah if she would like to take that on based on some of her work with the program.
Absolutely, Desiree. Thank you so much. So we, the last 2 years, we implemented a youth outcome survey. So as the youth are being intaked, there is a survey that is provided to them. It's really kid-friendly, so to speak. It's written so they can, talk about where they stand, who their, what their social network is, how often are they going to school, what's their family engagement like. There's some mental health questions in the sense if our providers can do that. So it really, kind of runs the gamut. Then at the 6-month time of match, so we do it at intake, the 6-month time of match, if the match is still going on, the programs then implement that as well. So they do it as, a second time around, just to kind of see what mentoring has happened. Are they seeing an improvement, from the time the initial intake to the 6-month match? And then if that match does sustain the year, which we always hope that it does, then we do it again. So it's about 2 years that we've been doing that. We have some initial first-year results. Not all of the matches in the network stay to 6 months or to the year. So, it's kind of hard, when you don't have a full, 100% return on your investment, so to speak, for surveys. But they are trending to what the youth are saying is that they're more engaged in school. They're not hanging around with their friends maybe who had poor behaviors, or maybe they're hanging around with them less. They're being more engaged with their families. They're speaking up for themselves. Their self-esteem is really improving. So we're seeing some initial trends in that way. We are in the process of working with with a university here for our network, who will have their grad students and their staff work with us on some additional evaluation that really delves deep into what the youth are feeling and what those outcomes are based on, what we've determined with the mentoring programs. So thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. I'd like to also ask Tina and Ronin to kind of take that same question or any kind of thoughts on, and the question again was, do you conduct any surveys, assessments throughout the match and or at the end of the match to track improvements or benefits of the match? And so, Ronin, if you'd like to kind of jump in first, and then Tina.
Sure. So I should just put out there, my agency doesn't do the direct service, but we do provide technical assistance to a number of programs. So I've actually seen a few different things, some that are very similar to what Hannah was just describing. I think, and it might sound a little bit of a cop-out, but I think the answer is oftentimes really depends on what your program's capacity is, what you're trying to learn, and who your population is. So I think doing surveys midway through and at the end are really important. It just really comes down to what kinds of questions you're asking. And so I mentioned in our section about when doing evaluation, thinking through some out-of-the-box outcomes like knowledge gain and behavior change. And so in addition to checking with your mentees, I think it's important to look into surveying your mentors about how things have, what they've seen change with their mentees, surveying the mentees' family, especially in a youth program. Have the parents, guardians, other family members, have they felt that there's been an improvement in their relationships? Like I mentioned before, I've worked with a number of fatherhood programs, and it's actually come up a lot where when seeking support for their programs, people are often asking, has the life of the child been improved? And so what we've talked about is oftentimes these are young fathers and the children are too young to be surveyed, but maybe following up with the co-parent or whoever is the caregiver of that child and providing them with, whether it's a survey or an interview, to find out, since the father or the other parent has taken part in this program, have you seen an improved relationship with the child? Have you seen an improved co-parenting relationship? Obviously, not everyone has the capacity to do this, but in an ideal world, you'd be able to get the surveys from them, surveys from the mentor, surveys from the mentee, kind of look at how all those results play together. So I think that, I hope that answers the question, but again, I've seen that there's been a lot of variety, and I think what it comes down to is what you're trying to figure out and what you have the capacity to measure.
Thank you, Ronin. Tina, do you have any further thoughts for that question?
Sure. The information Hannah and Ronin both shared was very point on, and the other information I would add to it is if you're working with juveniles that are still in a school system, and if you've got a consent to speak to the school, which is something that we get at intake, you might want to also poll or survey a teacher to see how is this youth doing academically, also in terms of their attendance. Are they showing up for school? Are they there 3 days a week instead of 5? You know, to get a sense of how are they doing at that level, because of course one of the major goals is to try to maintain these kids in school so that they can graduate through high school and hopefully make plans for future as well.
Oh, thank you. All right, just a couple more questions. We have some great questions in the box, in the question box. One of them is looking at credible messengers again, and I want to kind of turn that over, I guess, a little bit to Hannah and Tina. Thinking about how do you employ credible messengers to actually work in the programs in an administrative capacity when they should actually effectively operate the program. Do you have any advice on how you bridge that issue? Not necessarily the mentors, if that is something that you all have seen happen. So the actual employees being credible messengers.
So I'm going to turn that one, Desiree, over to Tina because she is the direct service provider.
Right.
Thank you, Hannah. We actually at Family Reentry have adult staff that are successful ex-offenders. 3 men in particular that have served quite a number of years in prison, as well as quite a number of years back in the community being successful, having turned their lives around, and now their work is their ministry and their mission. One of those staff members has served as a volunteer mentor for us in the past. These are paid employees. So when you're seeking out credible messengers per se, unless you do have some kind of way to employ somebody who's looking for work, most of the programs that we're involved with through the Juvenile Justice Network, we're working with volunteers. So the way I would try to offset that a little bit, of course it's nothing like paying someone an hourly rate, the way I would try to offset that would be to pass on gasoline gift cards, be sure to give those folks different kinds of activity cards that are either donated or that the program can purchase at a discount rate, just to kind of ease that for them. But as of right now, our programs do not employ people to serve as mentors. It is a model we have looked at because I think that there's great value in having somebody on staff that could do multiple and possibly group mentoring. So that is something that we have often looked at, but at the present time we're just working with volunteers. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our last question. What are the main benefits for the mentors? And I'll kind of ask Ronin if he could think about that and just kind of close us out.
So the question was, what are the main benefits of taking part in this program for the mentors themselves? Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct.
Awesome. Well, I think there could be any number of benefits depending on how the program is set up, but I mean, I think one thing is just the fact that you're getting community involved in this work. I guess this isn't technically a benefit for the mentor, but more for community. It raises awareness about reentry issues. It raises awareness about youth involved in the system. And those mentors, especially if you're using mentors from the community who have not done this work traditionally, they're able to spread the word now that they are more involved with individuals who are in the system. So I think that's one benefit. I think the other one is it's enhancing their skills. Your mentoring program will be providing them with training that can be really beneficial for the rest of their work. So communication skills, motivational interviewing, giving them kind of background on reentry and correction systems. Those are important things for people to have an understanding of, and they can take that to their community and share either professionally in other volunteer work that they're doing in their personal life. You might have individuals who are formerly incarcerated who take part in mentoring, and this gives them this empowers them and gives them an opportunity to take part in the work. And one thing I do encourage you to do, though not always possible, is if there are opportunities to employ volunteer mentors who have been formerly incarcerated in the work, maybe the training begins while they volunteer, and that gets them to a point where they might be interested in working in the field itself. So I think those are some benefits. And of course, if your training comes with some certifications or building networking relationships with other professionals, as well as just building a strong personal relationship with their mentee, those are all really positive benefits. I also wanted to just throw out there as well, the report I mentioned that we've been working on, mentoring as a component of reentry. Unfortunately, it's not available yet. We don't have a formal release date, but it should be coming out soon. It's just currently going under final review. However, the content are, you can find parts of the content available, especially on risk, needs, responsivity, in other reports and products on our website. So I encourage you to do a Google search or search in our search bar for any of those particular topics. And once it's available, it'll come out in our newsletter. So I encourage you to sign up for our National Reentry Resource Center newsletter, so you'll be notified immediately once that report is available. But yeah, I hope that covered the question.
Thank you so much, Ronin. Thank you so much to Tina and Ronin again. Thank you to Desiree for asking some fantastic questions, and thank you to everybody who submitted all those fantastic questions that we weren't able to get to. So we are going to wrap up today with some of our last slides. So next slide, please. We encourage everyone to get no-cost technical assistance for your mentoring program. Whether you need help with recruitment, planning, program design, evaluation, or anything in between all of those, you can request free technical assistance through the National Mentoring Resource Center, which is a resource funded by the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention and facilitated in partnership with Mentor. Wherever you are located in the United States, the NMRC is for you. Additionally, we encourage you to register your mentoring program with the Mentoring Connector, and there's a link on this website or on our PowerPoint, and when you get the PowerPoint deck, it'll bring you right to it. A national database for mentoring programs. The zip code searchable database allows mentors and mentees from across the country to find your program, and it's connected to LinkedIn, My Brother's Keeper, NBA Cares, and so many other avenues of free program advertisement. So just a reminder on the next slide, please. 1 week after this webinar, all attendees will receive an email with a link to the Collaborative Mentoring Webinar Series webpage, where we will post the recordings, the slides, and any additional resources. Also, don't forget that we'll want your feedback. So at the end of today's webinar, please answer the short survey that will help us make the series even better. And next slide. Please be sure to visit us at the CMWS page on Mentor's website for an archive of all past webinars and information about upcoming webinars. And last slide, our next webinar is coming up on May 18th, and the topic will be mentoring commercially sexually exploited youth. So that is May 18th from 1 o'clock to 2:15 Eastern Time. Thank you again so much for everybody joining us today. When you close out of today's webinar, just please take a few moments to complete your survey. We welcome any feedback on this webinar and future webinars. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great Thursday. Bye-bye.